It's often expected that someone who endures the extraordinary hardship of being detained overseas, especially under politically charged and dangerous circumstances, would return with a deep sense of perspective, humility, and gratitude, particularly when their release involves significant diplomatic intervention from their home country. Brittney Griner, a competitive athlete who found herself imprisoned in Russia and then liberated through a highly famous and contentious prisoner swap, has instead made headlines for a completely different cause. Voicing outrage not at the injustice she suffered abroad, but at the newfound attention, volume, and energy that supporters have brought to the WNBA since Caitlin Clark's arrival. Her views, particularly those implying that fan excitement could be linked to subtle racism, what she called mild racism, provoked strong criticism, and finally led to a highly public response. Among the many who responded was sports pundit Stephan Smith, who gave a scathing reality check, not through personal assaults, but by holding up the mirror of facts and common sense. Smith's commentary pointed out the ridiculousness of someone rescued through an international agreement, one that required exchanging a notorious arms dealer known as the Merchant of Death, coming back and taking problem with the sound levels at basketball arenas. He didn't disrespect Griner, but rather questioned how someone who was once in a position where every basic freedom was stripped away could now complain about enthusiastic fans simply doing what sports fans do, cheering. The consequences of her words transcend beyond one player's opinion. They touch on bigger topics of gratitude, professionalism, and the growing pains of a league finally moving into the national spotlight. Griner described the crowds as loud, distracting, and even indicated that the appearance of a cheering father and daughter might have had racial overtones. That comment, ambiguous and accusatory without evidence, unleashed the floodgates. It was not merely a matter of opinion anymore. It became a reflection of a worldview that tended to interpret fan emotion as animosity rather than support. Stephan was not alone in pointing this out. Other commentators, athletes, and observers expressed the notion that Griner's reaction indicated a lack of knowledge of the nature of professional sports and the obligations that come with public platforms. Fans in every major sports league provide energy, enthusiasm, and yes, noise. It's part of the experience, not a problem to be solved. Her words suggested she viewed the rise in attention as a negative force, rather than a chance to improve the game and display the quality that has long gone unrecognized in the women's league. Made things worse was her response to criticism. Instead of conceding that her statements may have been poorly stated or misconstrued, she doubled back, lashing out at critics, accusing them of stupidity, and depicting herself as a victim of unfair treatment. This kind of defensiveness just added gasoline to the fire, especially in an era where athletes are expected to exhibit accountability and react to criticism. It's not that Griner isn't entitled to her feelings. She absolutely is. But when such feelings become the centerpiece of a public narrative, and when they occur at the same moment the league is finally acquiring genuine momentum, it raises issues about priorities and awareness. What's particularly frustrating to many observers is the difference between Griner and other athletes, notably Caitlin Clark herself, who has been under enormous scrutiny, faced targeted fouls, and still handled her climb with calm and professionalism. While Clark has embraced the occasion, Griner's answer felt like resistance to change. And that transformation is vital. For years, the WNBA has remained in relative obscurity compared to other major leagues. Now, with greater media coverage, sold-out arenas, and a boom in television deals, the spotlight is finally going on to women's basketball, and not everyone appears ready for it. Griner's uneasiness with the crowd interaction seemed to reflect a preference for the peaceful days when expectations were lower and criticism was minimal. But that's not how professional sports progress. With expansion comes scrutiny, and with examination comes the need for thicker skin, not evasion. Stephan's words stung hard, not because they were nasty, but because they were anchored in the reality of how professional sports function and how prominent individuals must conduct themselves. He reminded viewers that Griner's freedom came at a tremendous cost, one that necessitated giving away a dangerous international criminal. That alone should give everyone pause before presenting their current discomfort in unduly dramatic terms. In addressing this, Stephan underlined how tone-deaf it is to shift focus from the triumph of freedom to the frustrations of game day atmosphere, and the audience took notice. Social media was ablaze with replies, many agreeing that Gurrier's perspective felt misaligned with the occasion. Even fellow athletes chose not to defend her, which said loudly. The silence from her colleagues suggested that the greater WNBA community understood the damage such statements might bring to the league's brand, especially at a time when public perception counts more than ever. The league is struggling for popular acceptability, and remarks that characterize its expansion as a problem rather than a breakthrough risk undoing years of progress. Additionally, Gurrier's discussion of racial dynamics, especially without specific occurrences or context, further confuse the waters. When phrases like mild racism are tossed about loosely, it can lessen the seriousness of real racial concerns and generate unnecessary divisiveness. It becomes harder to unite people over actual injustices when public officials emphasize race without sufficient justification. Stephan emphasized this point as well, highlighting the significance of using one's platform wisely. He wasn't arguing racism doesn't exist. He was emphasizing that not every uncomfortable moment is inherently racially motivated and suggesting contrary without evidence can do more harm than good. The entire story also highlights how social media can turn a statement into a catastrophe. Rather than letting the story die down, Gurrier's repeated posts and defense declarations kept it alive, guaranteeing that what may have been a one-day debate evolved into a multi-day conflagration. This reaction, emotional, deflective, and lacking in self-awareness, merely reinforced the very complaints being levied against her. He wasn't arguing racism doesn't exist. He was emphasizing that not every uncomfortable moment is inherently racially motivated and suggesting contrary without evidence can do more harm than good. The entire story also highlights how social media can turn a statement into a catastrophe. Rather than letting the story die down, Gurrier's repeated posts and defense declarations kept it alive, guaranteeing that what may have been a one-day debate evolved into a multi-day conflagration. This reaction, emotional, deflective, and lacking in self-awareness, merely reinforced the very complaints being levied against her. For many, it became an example of how not to respond to public criticism. Instead of displaying progress, contemplation, or thankfulness, the message delivered was one of entitlement and victimhood. And that's sad since Gurrier is undoubtedly skilled and has the potential to be a constructive factor in the sport. But that potential is diminished when personal issues take center stage over the game itself. Her story of survival, of homecoming, of redemption could have been a compelling narrative of perseverance. Instead, it became a case study in how public perception may quickly sour when appreciation is replaced with grievance. Going ahead, the lesson here is clear. Athletes, especially those with high reputations, must know the weight their comments carry. When you've been given a second shot through extraordinary circumstances, you're not simply representing yourself. You're representing every individual who fought for your return, every diplomat who negotiated on your behalf, every fan who backed your journey. Complaining about crowd noise, especially when it symbolizes the sport's long-awaited breakthrough, risks alienating the very audience you need to succeed. The criticism Griner received wasn't about silencing her. It was about holding her to the same standard of accountability expected of every public figure. In the end, Stephen A. Smith's statements didn't come from a place of hatred, but from a wish to remind everyone, even Gurrier, of what's at risk and what's expected when you're in the spotlight. The WNBA is growing, adapting, and finally gaining traction. This is the moment to embrace development, not resent it. And for Brittney Griner, this could have been an opportunity to illustrate how adversity leads to strength and knowledge. Instead, it became a cautionary story about how easily goodwill can be wasted when self-awareness gives way to self-pity.